I spent $60,000 to make my sister's wedding perfect. Every detail, every flower, every bite of food, I handled it all. And then, out of nowhere, my family decided I shouldn't even be there. Let me tell you exactly what happened, because this story still haunts me. I'm Clara Weston, 30, from Denver. I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one who steps up. My little sister, Tessa, is 27, bubbly, full of dreams, and I loved her like my own child in a way. When she got engaged, I wanted her wedding to be unforgettable. I didn't hesitate. I gave $60,000 to cover the venue, the catering, the flowers, everything. I wanted it to be a gift from the heart, something she'd remember forever, and I thought my family would be thrilled. Planning a wedding professionally has taught me a lot about details, timing, and presentation. I spent hours making sure every arrangement reflected Tessa's personality. Soft blush roses, a live jazz band for the reception, a menu that would wow everyone. I even coordinated with the photographer to capture every single emotional moment. I was proud, excited, and couldn't wait to see her smile on the big day. We used to be close. I thought we'd laugh together in the bridal suite, share a few tears, and celebrate like sisters should. I never imagined that my involvement, my love, and my money would become a wedge instead of a bridge. For weeks, I called Tessa to finalize details, and at first she was cheerful. Then slowly, things started changing. Calls went unanswered, messages left unread, and when she did reply, there was a shortness in her tone I didn't understand. My parents, Diane and Russell, seemed distant too, busy with their own concerns, but still polite enough not to raise alarm. I tried to shake it off, blaming it on wedding stress. But then came the first warning. My mother, Diane, said over the phone, without any explanation, "Clara, don't come to the rehearsal." I remember freezing. My heart sank. I asked why, and she said nothing, just repeated, "It's better this way." Something was very wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. I kept hoping it was a misunderstanding, that it would all be resolved. Little did I know, my $60,000, my effort, my love, was about to be used against me in the cruelest way. My family had decided I wasn't welcome at the very celebration I'd made possible. The same family I'd given everything to had turned their backs, leaving me shocked, hurt, and questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and family. From that moment, I realized that sometimes the people you give everything to will be the ones who hurt you the most. And that realization was just the beginning of a long, painful, and eye-opening journey. I started noticing it weeks before the wedding, the little things that didn't add up. My sister, Tessa, who used to call me every day just to share something silly or exciting, suddenly seemed distant. Her messages were short, curt, and sometimes didn't get answered at all. Calls that used to last an hour now lasted 5 minutes, and she sounded annoyed, even angry, when she finally picked up. I kept telling myself it was just wedding stress, that maybe she was overwhelmed with planning and the new fiancé, Gavin. But deep down, something felt off. Even my parents, Diane and Russell, started acting differently. They seemed distracted whenever I tried to talk about the wedding or my plans. When I brought up the flowers or the catering arrangements I was coordinating, Diane's responses were clipped, almost cold. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe I was imagining things, or that they were just tired. But the feeling in my stomach told me I wasn't wrong. Something had shifted. Then it happened. I had called to confirm some rehearsal details, hoping to smooth things over, and my mother's voice was flat and sharp when she answered. "Clara," she said, "don't come to the rehearsal." My heart dropped so fast I could barely breathe. "What?" I whispered, thinking maybe I had misheard. "Don't come," she repeated, no explanation, no apology, nothing. I tried to reason, to ask why, to understand, but she cut me off and hung up. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the dashboard, trying to process it. How could this be happening? I had poured my heart into making this wedding perfect, giving everything I could to help my sister have the day of her dreams. And now I wasn't even allowed to attend the rehearsal, something that was supposed to be a happy, intimate moment for family and friends. I kept going over every conversation, every interaction, trying to figure out what I might have done wrong. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't me. Something else was going on, something I wasn't being told. The coldness, the distance, the curt words. It all felt deliberate, like a wall had gone up between me and my family overnight. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with this tension. Every call felt like a test, every message a potential disappointment. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pushed out, slowly, carefully, like my presence had become unwanted. And as much as I tried to ignore it, to chalk it up to stress or miscommunication, a growing knot of fear and anger formed inside me. Something was coming, and I had no idea just how deep the betrayal would go. By the time the rehearsal day arrived, I knew that the life I thought I had with my family, the closeness, the trust, the love, had already started to crumble. And I had no choice but to watch it all slip away, not knowing that the worst was yet to come. 3 weeks before the wedding, I opened my email and froze. There it was, a formal-looking message from Gavin, my sister's fiancé. My hands shook as I read the words over and over. Due to recent tensions, it's best if you don't attend the wedding. I couldn't breathe. My $60,000 gift, my time, my love, all of it seemed meaningless now. I felt like someone had ripped the ground from under me. I stared at the screen for a long time, hoping it was some kind of mistake. Maybe Gavin had been hacked or someone was playing a cruel joke. But no, the email had all the correct details, the polite but cold tone that left no room for discussion. I tried to call Tessa immediately, hoping she would explain, hoping she would tell me it wasn't true. But she didn't answer. My calls went straight to voicemail. Panic and disbelief wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. Next, I dialed my parents, Diane and Russell, desperate for answers. My father picked up, his voice calm, almost too calm. "Clara," he said, "this is what's best for the family." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You're saying I can't come to my sister's wedding?" I couldn't even find the right words. "Clara, just trust us," he said before hanging up. I was left holding my phone like it was suddenly made of ice, my chest tight, my heart pounding. I sat down, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. Every happy memory of helping Tessa, every hour I spent coordinating flowers and catering, every dollar of that $60,000, none of it mattered to them. They had not only pushed me out of the wedding, but they were keeping my money, using it to fund a celebration that I couldn't even attend. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest, and I couldn't understand why. I thought about the people I trusted most in my life. My sister, who I had raised in a sense, my parents, who I believed loved and appreciated me. All had turned against me. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Had I done something to offend them without knowing? Was this a misunderstanding that could be fixed? But deep down, I knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. The coldness in their words, the decision in Gavin's email, the refusal to explain, it all pointed to one thing. I was being deliberately excluded. For the first time, I felt completely alone. I had been a giver my whole life, the one who took care of others, the one who made sacrifices for those I loved. And now, with nothing but silence and the cruel irony of my $60,000 still in their hands, I realized I had been betrayed by the people I thought I could always trust. Sitting there, I felt a mixture of grief and anger boiling inside me. The wedding I helped pay for, the sister I adored, the family I loved, all had turned their backs. And in that quiet moment, I began to understand that this was more than hurt. It was a turning point. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let this go unanswered. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My cousin, someone I hadn't talked to in years, called me with a shaky voice and said, "Clara, you won't believe what your family has been telling everyone." My stomach dropped. I listened in disbelief as she explained that my parents and Tessa had been telling relatives and friends that I made a scene and demanded attention, twisting the story to make it seem like I was the problem. Lies, all of them. Everything I had done out of love was suddenly being painted as selfishness. Then she sent me photos. I stared at them in shock. The wedding hall, the flowers, the catered tables, the decorations, all arranged beautifully. And I knew immediately what it meant. Every bit of it had been paid for with my $60,000. The images were like a punch to the gut. I could see the table settings I had chosen, the color scheme I had spent months perfecting, the floral arrangements I had selected with Tessa's favorite blooms in mind. And yet, I wasn't welcome to see any of it in person. My love and effort had been turned into proof against me, used as justification to exclude me. I sat there in silence for a long time, scrolling through the photos over and over, my hands trembling. My heart ached, but anger was starting to replace the initial shock. How could they do this? How could they lie about me to everyone, painting me as the villain, while using my money to throw the wedding I had hoped to celebrate with them? It felt like everything I trusted had been ripped away. That night, I went through my files, my receipts, every email, and every contract I had for the wedding. I started compiling everything quietly, a full record of every payment I had made, every vendor I had booked, every service I had organized. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew I needed to have proof. Proof that I had been the one supporting this wedding, proof that my family had used me and my money, and proof that I wasn't the one causing drama. I felt a strange mix of grief and determination. I had been blindsided by people I trusted the most, but I realized I still had control over something: the truth and the resources I had provided. They had tried to humiliate me, to write me out of my sister's big day, and to make me look bad in front of everyone. But I wasn't powerless. I started making plans in my head, quietly imagining ways to reclaim what was mine, to ensure they couldn't take advantage of me without consequences. By the end of that night, my heartbreak had shifted into something stronger: resolve. I wouldn't let their lies and betrayal define me. I wouldn't allow my love and generosity to be used against me. I had been wronged, yes, but I was ready to take the first careful steps toward turning that betrayal into something they couldn't ignore. It was the beginning of a quiet, calculated fight, one they would never see coming. I decided I needed to see it for myself. I told myself it was just to check on the vendors, to make sure everything was in order. But really, I needed to see how my family was using my $60,000, and if there was any way I could make sense of this betrayal. I drove to Maple Ridge Estate, the venue I had helped book, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The estate was beautiful, as expected. The gardens were blooming, the tables perfectly set, the chairs lined up in neat rows. Everything looked exactly like I had planned, exactly like I had imagined for Tessa's big day. For a moment, I felt a pang of pride. This was my work, my vision. But the pride was quickly replaced by a sharp twist of anger in my chest. I wasn't supposed to be here, yet here it all was, paid for by me without my presence. I approached the event coordinator, a friendly woman named Marlene, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hi, I'm Clara Weston. I just wanted to confirm some of the vendor schedules and make sure everything is on track," I said, forcing a smile. She looked uncomfortable, glancing around before leaning in slightly. "Clara, we weren't expecting you," she said quietly. I need to be honest. I was told that you aren't welcome on site." I froze. My heart dropped, and a flush of humiliation swept over me. The person I trusted to handle this wedding, the very place I had invested my time, money, and love into, had been told I was not allowed there. I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides. I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand an explanation from someone, anyone. But I stayed silent. Marlene continued hesitantly. "All your payments, everything you booked, it's all prepaid. The venue, the catering, the decorations, the florists, nearly everything." Her words hit me like a cold wave. They had used my money to prepare the entire wedding while keeping me out, as if I had no right to even witness it. I stepped back, my mind spinning. The betrayal was deeper than I realized. They hadn't just excluded me. They had tried to erase me, turning my generosity into something that now seemed like a weapon against me. But instead of breaking me, it sparked something new. My heartbreak transformed into something sharper, clearer: resolve. I left the venue that day with a new determination. I would not let them get away with this. I would find a way to reclaim what was mine, to prove that I hadn't been the problem they made me out to be. Every detail, every flower, every dollar I had spent became evidence of my love and my contribution. And I knew in that moment that the next steps I took would be careful, deliberate, and powerful. They had humiliated me, yes, but I wasn't finished. Not even close. I knew I had to face her in person. I needed answers, needed to look my mother in the eye and understand why she and the rest of my family had treated me this way. I drove over to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with questions I didn't know the answers to. When I walked in, my mother, Diane, looked up from her cup of tea with a cold, almost indifferent expression. I took a deep breath. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "About the wedding. About everything. Why was I excluded? Why am I not welcome at my sister's big day after all I did?" She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. "Clara," she said, her voice smooth and almost cruel, "you've always thought money buys love. Maybe now you'll learn it doesn't." I stared at her, my chest tightening, my heart pounding. I opened my mouth, trying to find words to argue, to plead, to make her see reason, but nothing came out. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything I had ever felt. I realized then that this was not about misunderstanding or miscommunication. This was intentional. Every slight, every exclusion, every cold word had been deliberate. I don't understand," I whispered, my voice shaking. I gave everything, my money, my time, my love. I planned, I worked, I sacrificed, and this is how you treat me. Diane didn't answer. She just sipped her tea, her face unreadable. It was staggering how completely she dismissed me, how easily she could strip away the bond one thought we had built over 30 years. I felt a wave of grief wash over me, mingling with anger that burned deep in my chest. I left the house shaking, my hands trembling as I closed the car door behind me. The tears I tried to hold back now came freely, blurring my vision. My family had never appreciated me. They had used me, my efforts, my money, and my love, and then turned me away without remorse. The betrayal was absolute, crushing, and yet, in that moment of despair, something inside me shifted. Alone in my car, I took a deep breath and wiped my eyes. The grief was still there, but it was mixed with a new clarity. I realized that while I couldn't change what had already happened, I could control what happened next. I could reclaim what was mine. I could make sure they didn't get away with using me without consequence. I started running through possibilities in my mind, quietly planning, carefully considering my next moves. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about justice, about proving that I wasn't the problem. Every detail I had paid for, every contract I had signed, every dollar spent became part of a plan that I would carry out with precision. By the time I started the car and drove away, I wasn't broken. I was focused. I knew what I had to do, and I was ready to act. The humiliation, the cruelty, the betrayal, it had all fueled something stronger than despair. It had fueled resolve. I realized that if I wanted justice, I couldn't wait for my family to admit their wrongdoing. I had to take matters into my own hands. I decided to reclaim what was mine, every dollar, every service, every booking I had paid for. It wasn't about revenge for the sake of anger. It was about making sure my love and effort weren't used against me. Using my experience as an event planner, I began contacting the vendors I had booked. I explained the situation honestly and calmly, showing contracts and proof of payment. Most of them didn't even hesitate. They knew the law and the contracts were clear. I canceled the bookings under my name, ensuring it was all perfectly legal. At the same time, I reached out to a couple I knew personally, a veteran and his fiancée, who had recently lost their venue deposit due to circumstances beyond their control. I offered them every service, every vendor I had already paid, transferring the contracts to them. One by one, the florists, the caterers, the photographers, the rental companies, everything started moving from Tessa's wedding to this new couple. Every call I made, every email I sent, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and relief. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was simply redirecting what was rightfully mine to someone who would truly appreciate it. It felt like setting things right, piece by piece. Meanwhile, the Weston family had no idea what was happening. They were busy in their bubble, preparing for a wedding they thought was fully secured and guaranteed. But a few days before the event, the first call came. The florist canceled, citing the contract transfer. Then the caterer followed, explaining that the deposit had been legally reassigned. Soon, nearly every vendor had pulled out, leaving the Weston family scrambling and panicked. Their perfect wedding, funded by my money, was falling apart, and they couldn't do a thing about it. I stayed quiet, watching from a distance, letting the chaos unfold without gloating or making a scene. It was strangely peaceful to know that I had taken back control over what had been taken from me. Every arrangement I had made, every dollar I had spent, was now being used to create joy for a couple who truly deserved it, rather than being wasted on people who had turned against me. The sense of empowerment was unlike anything I had felt before. For the first time in weeks, I felt a kind of calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't desperate to be accepted or loved by a family that had shown me they didn't care. I had done what I needed to do. I had reclaimed what was mine, and I had done it carefully, legally, and with purpose. As I sat back and watched the story unfold, I realized something important. Sometimes justice isn't about confrontation or yelling. It's about quietly, smartly, and effectively reclaiming your power. And that's exactly what I had done. The morning of Tessa's wedding, I woke up early with a strange calm. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, letting the quiet settle around me. I knew what was about to happen, but instead of excitement or anger, I felt free. Free from the family that had betrayed me, free from the expectation that I had to endure their cruelty. By mid-morning, messages started coming in from mutual friends and distant relatives. They were panicked, confused, and sometimes angry, asking why the caterers hadn't arrived, why the florists had canceled, why the photographer wasn't there. I didn't answer. I just took another sip of wine and watched the storm unfold from a safe distance. At Maple Ridge Estate, chaos reigned. The hall was empty. Tables were set, but the linen sat cold and unadorned. The flowers never delivered, the food never prepared. Guests milled around in confusion, whispering to each other, checking their phones, wondering if there had been some last-minute disaster. I could almost hear the panic rising through the messages and texts that started trickling in to everyone connected to the wedding. The Weston family was frantic. My sister Tessa called repeatedly, her voice shaking with stress and frustration. My parents, Diane and Russell, were equally hysterical, trying to salvage what they thought would be a perfect day. They didn't know that everything had been legally reassigned, that every vendor, every contract, every service I had paid for was no longer theirs to command. Their panic was a direct result of their own actions, and I stayed silent, letting them experience the consequences of their choices. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate with a sense of cruelty. I simply felt relief. Relief that my role in this family's drama was over. Relief that my generosity and care had not been wasted, but had been redirected to people who truly deserved it. And relief that I was no longer at the mercy of a family that had chosen lies over love. As the hours passed, I kept watching the messages from friends come in. Photos of confused guests, empty plates, and anxious vendors flooded social media. The wedding that had been planned to be perfect, polished, and joyous was now in shambles. But only because the Weston family had turned their backs on me and tried to erase me from the event. I leaned back in my chair, finishing my glass of wine, and finally allowed myself to exhale. The storm was real, the chaos undeniable, but it was also strangely beautiful. It marked the end of their control over me, the end of their ability to use me, and the beginning of my own freedom. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. I didn't need to confront them, didn't need to yell or explain. The consequences had arrived naturally, legally, and perfectly. And I realized that sometimes freedom feels like watching a storm from a distance, knowing you're no longer part of the chaos. Yet it's exactly what needed to happen. Weeks after the chaos of what should have been Tessa's wedding, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, calls, texts, all from my parents and sister, furious, panicked, and demanding answers. Legal threats started arriving, lawyers' emails piling into my inbox, claiming I had interfered with the wedding and caused damages. For a moment, I felt a flicker of unease, but then I reminded myself of the truth. I hadn't done anything wrong. Every action I had taken was legal, documented, and fully justified. I started replying calmly and clearly, attaching contracts, receipts, and all the messages showing that I had been the one who paid for and booked every vendor. Every dollar was accounted for, every service transferred legally to another couple. I watched as the initial storm of anger slowly transformed into confusion and hesitation on the other end. Their lawyer responded first, clearly reviewing the proof I had provided, and within hours, the threats stopped. The Weston family realized that they had no case, none at all. Even as the messages and calls faded, the emotional aftermath lingered. Tessa eventually got married, but it was in a small courthouse ceremony, far from the dream wedding she had once envisioned. I heard about it through mutual friends. It was quiet, strained, and lacking the grandeur she had wanted. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, a hint of sorrow, but mostly a sense of finality. The wedding that had once represented so much hope and family connection was now just a memory of betrayal, lessons learned, and boundaries firmly set. I finally decided to cut all contact. I changed my number, blocked messages, and stopped checking social media for updates from my family. It was the hardest step emotionally, but I knew it was necessary. The people I had loved and trusted had shown me their true colors, and it was clear that any further attempts at connection would only bring frustration and pain. Sitting alone in my apartment, I reflected on everything that had happened. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the anger, the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming what was mine. It all felt like a long, difficult journey that had led to a kind of freedom I hadn't known I needed. I realized that family doesn't always mean loyalty or appreciation. And sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to step away and take control of your own life. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. I had been wronged, yes, but I had acted with integrity, intelligence, and calm. The storm had passed, leaving me stronger, more self-reliant, and free from the chaos of people who didn't respect me. And in that quiet, still moment, I understood something important. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing yourself, protecting your peace, and finally allowing yourself to move forward without the weight of betrayal holding you back. The Weston family had lost their chance to control me, and I had gained something far more valuable: my freedom and my dignity intact. Months after everything had settled, I found myself sitting in my new office, sunlight streaming through the windows, surrounded by fresh flowers and neatly stacked event planning books. The chaos of my family's betrayal was behind me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt calm. I had taken the refunded portion of my $60,000 and invested it into starting my own event company, True North Weddings. It was more than a business. It was a fresh start, a chance to build something meaningful from the pain I had endured. The first clients were a young couple I met through friends, both kind, hardworking, and genuinely excited to plan their wedding. Helping them brought a sense of joy I hadn't realized I'd missed. Every meeting, every call, every detail I arranged reminded me why I had fallen in love with this work in the first place. It wasn't about recognition or money. It was about creating memories, celebrating love, and bringing happiness to people who truly appreciated it. As the weeks went by, more couples came to me, each with their own dreams and challenges. Planning their weddings became a form of healing, a way to redirect the energy that had once been tied up in heartbreak and anger. I poured myself into every project, ensuring that every event felt personal, thoughtful, and unforgettable. I discovered a satisfaction that wasn't tied to family approval, but to my own sense of purpose and accomplishment. I often thought about my parents and Tessa, about the betrayal that had cut me off from them and used my generosity against me. The hurt was real, and it had left scars, but over time I realized something important. That pain had also freed me. It had shown me that my worth wasn't tied to their approval, that love from family isn't guaranteed, and that I had the strength to rebuild my life on my own terms. I didn't feel the need for revenge anymore. The legal steps I had taken, the vendors I had redirected, the quiet justice I had orchestrated, that was enough. I didn't need to humiliate them or seek further confrontation. The freedom I had gained, the peace I felt, and the new path I was walking were far more valuable than any lingering anger. Sitting at my desk, watching my first team members arrange decorations for a client's wedding, I felt a quiet sense of pride and strength. I had turned betrayal into opportunity, heartbreak into resilience, and exclusion into self-empowerment. I realized that family isn't always the source of love and support we hope for, but sometimes losing them allows us to find ourselves. I smiled softly, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal had broken me, yes, but it had also opened the door to a life I had never imagined. A life filled with purpose, dignity, and peace. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Do you think Clara handled her family's betrayal the right way by taking control and walking away, or should she have tried to fix things with them? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And if you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one.